Police have launched an internal investigation as it is alleged that the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences, or FCS-unit, has a countrywide shortage or a crisis of a shortage on DNA and rape kits. So the DA has told Parliament recently that the FCS-unit has the shortage in these kits that are critical when it comes to rape cases. It's reported that Gauteng has the largest shortage of DNA and rape kits. Now, rape kits allow police officers to collect samples on rape victims, which are then sent in for analysis. Morning Live has invited the police to please come in and talk about this issue, but unfortunately they declined the invitation. So pending the outcome of their investigations. But joining us now, we've got Vincentia Dlamini. She's the Operations Director of Women and Men Against Child Abuse to talk about this crisis. Vincentia, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, Leanne.
So let's just talk about the shortage now. What are we looking at? Well, how bad is the situation?
According to the reports, right, we're talking thousands of kids that are, are in shortage. And that tells you that if thousands of kids are not available, it means there are thousands of victims that are not going to get the DNA samples taken from there. Because we need to understand one thing, that once someone has been raped, they become a crime scene themselves. Yeah. And they have to be handled like a crime scene, which means that evidence needs to be collected. And without the crime kits, it becomes an injustice to our victims, because, especially in cases of children, because one, we know for children it's very difficult to talk about their abuse, but then we rely on DNA samples to actually help us with the investigation. But with the shortage, it's a problem. And the other thing is that, South Africa has got some good pieces of legislation, and maybe if we could look at how other legislation have been ratified so that we can remedy the current situation. If we look at the DNA Act, which is your criminal law and procedural Forensic Procedural Amendment Act of number 37 of 2013, yeah, which seeks to remedy other things where it was a problem to actually obtain this DNA. But we just have a piece of legislation. But if we don't have resources, it's a problem, because no matter how good a police officer, whether highly skilled, highly trained, they have compassion, but if they don't have the necessary tools, it's pointless.
There's nothing they can do.
Yes,
I mean, when that goes into a court of law and you don't have the evidence, the perpetrator is going to be let off.
It's going to be let off because, as we are sitting, Leanne, majority of child rape cases are thrown out of court, because the reason most of the time is cases withdrawn because there isn't enough evidence, right? And the other thing that we need to acknowledge, how DNA plays a major role, is the fact that with other cases, because we need to understand that rapists don't just rape and just sit back. Yeah. They go on a sort of a sexual assaulting spree, where we know that even if they move around, because we know in other places, one would go into a province and commit rape, and if the community knows, and then they flee to another place, say they move from KZN to another place. But with these crime kits, it helps with the investigation, because once they are caught, then they can be linked to different crimes.
Absolutely, you have the evidence. That
you have the evidence.
You've
got a database. The national database is there, so that these DNA samples can actually be, the profiles can actually be linked to the other crimes. But without that, which is a crucial role, it is just unfortunate and a disservice.
How long has this shortage been around for, that you know or that you're aware of?
Okay, unfortunately I cannot put a date into it, but what I know is that in my history, which is more than 10 years, like almost 15 years in the field, we've had different forms of issues with crime kits. All right. So sometimes you find that there is a shortage. Sometimes, even if there is no shortage, the crime kits are not user-friendly for healthcare workers. For example, sometimes you get another company that is going to have is going to get this crime kits manufactured, but sometimes they're not user-friendly, because sometimes you'll find that in one kit, it's actually better if in one kit you can take your buccal swabs, your hair samples, your oral swabs, but at one stage there was a time when these crime kits, it was just, you had to have different boxes for different evidences. So there's a number of issues with crime kits as we go, and we seek to remedy and bring everybody on board, bring the healthcare workers to actually put input in saying that this kit is not working for us, because now I have to take clothing samples separately. Now I have to take buccal swabs separately. So ideally you would love to have one crime kit for different samples.
So you actually know of some cases where it's an organization, I'm not sure which organization, but it had to turn away a rape victim because of the fact that they didn't have a rape kit.
It is an organization in Cape Town, Patch, which actually spoke to one of my colleagues and actually say, this is a problem that we have in Cape Town. We actually have to turn clients away. And it's just a disservice. And you can imagine for people that are passionate and working there, and when they say, we can't really assist you because we do not have a rape kit, what are we saying? Because the first thing a rape victim wants to do when they get home is actually have a proper bath. You know, you cannot, go around with someone's seminal fluid. You can't just, you just want to, deal with the trauma.
Clean yourself and feel as good as you possibly can.
Yeah, it is secondary victimization. So it's different aspects of it. It's being dehumanized. You've already been traumatized by the sexual assault. Then you go, that whole process, and then you present yourself to a facility where this is supposed to happen, and you're told there's nothing that we can assist you.
We can't help you.
We can't help you.
Can a hospital help you? I'm just asking. Can you go to a hospital in that case? Would they be able to help you?
In depending if they do have because the police officers do keep crime kits at police station, but in other services, in your normal casualty departments, the police have got to bring in a crime kit. But then if you present yourself in medical legal services, they normally keep their own crime kits to make it easier. But then, if there's no crime kit, I don't care how passionate the doctor or the forensic nurse is about their work. They don't have the tools.
Do their job.
Because you cannot. Because there's chain of evidence here. It's a barcoded kind of thing. It's not like you're just going to take swabs, any swab, You can't take a swab as if you're taking a swab for TB. It is a different one because it's got a serial number on it, which is going to form that chain of evidence that is going to be taken to the forensic nurse. The case number needs to be there, and it goes there.
Let's talk about where we can lay blame. I mean, because we've got to obviously figure out what's happened and why there is such a shortage. FCS, which of course is the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit, would you say this is a result of mismanagement? Surely they're responsible for ensuring that everybody has got kits and they're able to use it.
Remember, in government departments, they are your procurement departments. Those are the ones that are supposed to take that. And I think also the monitoring side, the oversight bodies, they need to come on. But I think it's a national problem now. The budget. The minister has got to allocate budget for these crime kits. And if the budget has been allocated, are the service providers that are supposed to give us crime kits not actually producing the crime kits at the rate that is required, then those issues need to come. I think it was better for them to come here and say, actually, the minister has actually given us a budget. We've appointed a service provider who couldn't give us the crime kits. So currently, because they're not here to tell us what really happened, it becomes a problem.
It's guessing now.
Now we're guessing. We're guessing.
But which is unfortunate because we did invite them. They say they want to do their own internal investigation and then come back to us. But according to these reports that have come out, Gauteng and the Eastern Cape are the hardest hit by the shortage of rape and DNA kits. What can we read into that? I mean, are these indicative of a high incidence of rape, or is it again, we're guessing, but
okay, let's talk about Gauteng. Gauteng has got a high number of incidents of rape. So what it means that whenever you procure these crime kits, obviously Gauteng needs to get more crime kits. So it is true. Gauteng, it's one province where rape is high.
Yeah, Eastern Cape we can guess, but we don't.
Yeah,
really
we can
know.
guess, but
we don't know.
Gauteng is definitely.
We're looking at so many situations at the moment where. I mean, we had this interview a bit earlier, which I think you're privy to, about the fact that a teacher can be a teacher as long as they haven't raped a child. If they have committed rape, they can still be a teacher. Now we're talking about stories that, rape does occur. I pluck up the courage to go report this firstly, because to get a woman to report rape is one of the most difficult things. You pluck up the courage, you go there. Now we don't have a kit and we can't do anything about it. I'm sorry, you have to go home. We are failing the woman. of South Africa, aren't we? I mean, you tell me, you work with us on a daily basis.
We're failing our victims, and I think the most vulnerable ones are your mentally challenged and the children, because they become more vulnerable. And I think it is just unfortunate that when we try as civil society to actually say we need resources, we need people trained, we make noise about this, we take people to task, but the reality is that people on the ground are actually feeling the brunt of mismanagement, because it doesn't make sense that you are going to be part of an investigation and don't care whether the crime kids are enough or not, because surely your FCS members during their parades, they do talk about these issues, that I was called in at 2 a.m. to go attend to a crime scene, but I couldn't. And then what do you do in a position of power? So you have a responsibility to actually, we cannot do anything when the rape has happened, we cannot undo it. Yeah. But what we need to do is make the system, very user-friendly for the victim, so that we minimize secondary victimization, we make the process, less traumatic, because once you go to a healthcare service, now you're going to be undressed again, you've just been violated. And when you go there, those are the issues. That is why we talk about empathy, we talk about training, we talk about being sensitized, because we know a lot of service providers are compassion fatigued. So those are the other issues. But when you have someone who's working there, they also don't have tools. What are we doing? So it's a number of factors that does show that, we are really failing in our fight against sexual offences.
Absolutely. Let's leave it there, unfortunately, for this morning. Vincentia Dlamini talking to us here on the program. She's a operations director at Women and Men Against Child Abuse, talking to us about the crisis the FCS unit of the police is facing with a shortage of rape and DNA kits. All right, it is 8 o'clock here on the program. Let's get into our 8 o'clock news bulletin.